Hey, it's Randy again, and once more, same shirt because I'm recording 3 videos all at once. Might go for a fourth. This one is about crossovers, and I get asked this a lot. How do you work a crossover? I guess how do you pull it together? How do you get multiple cartoonists to manage to do all the same things and not screw each other up and maintain right. Again, I'm sorry, I'm also working the comic. Sorry, I'm not looking directly at the camera. And every crossover I've done has been very, very different. I think I have done actually 3 crossovers. There we go. Crossovers with 3 different strips. I've done 3 with Queen of Wands. And the very first one was in September of 2002, and it was called Choo Choo Bear Go Down the Hole. And that one was very easy on me because I told Irie I was happy to do a crossover with a minimal amount of work because I was lazy. And it was a lot more on her. She borrowed Choo Choo Bear for a week, basically. And then a year later, October of 2003, I did a crossover called Positively Scandalous, which was a crossover between Something Positive and Scandal Sheet. Scandal Sheet is drawn by my friend Troy Smith. And that one was a little harder in that Scandal Sheet is a comic where the paranormal is real. There are vampires. There is a Bigfoot who works for a tabloid. And in Something Positive, those things don't exist at all. They just never have. And I have a list of what is and isn't real in Something Positive's reality. This means, I guess, the world. I don't know. I fidget. And we had to be very careful because his characters were just coming back from a battle with a vampire who lived in Boston. And in SP reality, that doesn't happen. And it was more or less his characters found the bar and hung out with my characters. It was a fun little BSing story. Everyone kind of getting along. I felt bad because Troy was so much more professional about it than I was. He had a long script treatment, and I accidentally stepped on one of his punchlines because I was just doing it the night before. And sorry about that, Troy. Still, it was fun though. And then I did 2 more crossovers with Queen of Wands after that. One was around May or June of 2004. I could look it up, but I'm lazy. And it's where Kestrel finds out who's been stealing her panties, and all this horrible stuff's going on in her life, and she calls Davin up to chew him out, and then they talk and they become I would say become friends, they get along. And then the second crossover where Kestrel comes to Boston to look for a job because she wants to leave Colorado. And Branwen helps her, and it's a lot of Branwen and Kestrel bonding. And Branwen admits to Kestrel then that she has a job opportunity that would cause her to leave the area. And that was kind of it. And then, Kestrel joined SP, but that's not a crossover. That's just taking someone else's character. I didn't do crossovers for a while because a lot of people would complain about them. But the big thing was always you're writing that person's dialogue wrong. You're right, you don't know how to write this person's characters. That was only really a problem with Scandal Sheet. None of his readers really complained. I actually had to write their dialogue then, but I could always show the script to them. With the 2 second Queen of Wands crossovers, Irie and I would talk either on IM or on the phone as we wrote our scripts. And she would write hers first, and she's like, okay, Kestrel will say this in the situation. What will Davin say? And I would give her an honest Davin answer. And if it was something that didn't work for the script, she would change Kestrel's question, and then I would change Davin's answer. And I did the same thing. So in those crossovers, I never wrote any of Kestrel's dialogue. She wrote all of it, and she never wrote Davin's or Branwen's dialogues. I wrote those. It was fun. It was very bizarre. And we'd be on the phone for a couple hours, and then we'd just hang up and go work and draw. But after you get a lot of people kind of snipping at you, you hold off on doing them for a while. I did a few cameos of other comic characters. Jenny Breeden from The Devil's Panties has appeared in SP. She and Davin were talking in IM or an IRC chat channel. Same with Joyce and Yex Bobbin. She showed up once in an SP. Um, I had someone else's character, a character called the Pet Professional, who was basically an animal assassin. He showed up once. I don't really consider those crossovers, though. I almost did a crossover with a comic called Gossamer Commons, which was written by Eric Burns, who also did the site Web Snark. And the problem was there also the characters were going to be, they're Fae related, they're paranormal, I guess, or mythological, and those things don't exist in SP's reality. And it never really got far beyond the let's talk about this stage. And I actually came up with a workaround for it, but I'm not going to say what it is because you never know. Maybe one day I'll get to use that with another comic. But it didn't happen. And then I did a crossover with Girls with Slingshots this past year in September. Actually, it started earlier than that. I met Danielle Corsetto last year at New England Webcomics Weekend, which was amazing and run by the baby, basically, of Meredith Grant of Octopus Pie. And Danielle was a sweetheart. We hung out. We actually were roommates there. And we talked about each other's comics, and we brought the idea we should do a crossover. And, we told ourselves we'd call each other and talk about it, and we couldn't come up with any fun ideas, really. A lot of it was like, very kind of sitcom-ish. Davin and Hazel get snowed in the airport, I think was one of my suggestions, and they had to basically hang out, and they're talking about where their lives are. Just basically getting someone who's on the outside of your problems to give you an honest reaction. But it just didn't work, and we kind of shelved it. And then two of her characters were going to get married, and one day she just set up a wedding album site, and I immediately went in as Davin and signed it, and told her, and she kind of laughed. And I said, hey, can I make a comic about this? Okay, and then she did a responding comic, and then we realized this is how the crossover will go. The problem with the crossover would be, though, that Davin doesn't know the main cast, and he has no reason to be part of the wedding party, which is where almost all of the characters were going to be. So it's Davin kind of showing up. And so she told me about some things that were going to happen with this character named QandA, who is pretty much the closest thing as an ongoing antagonist Girls with Slingshot has. And I said, well, that's who we can have Davin work with, that and the character Zach, who was just an usher. So it wasn't Davin really interacting with the core cast, per se. And that one was done differently, too, because, again, we didn't sit down, with Irie, and, we had talked on the phone and talked back and forth. Danielle doesn't have the time for that. And, Irie wouldn't have the time for it now either, to be honest. So it was a lot of what I would have to do was call her up beforehand, and I tell her the situation I want. And there was also a lot of interviewing her about QandA and asking her questions. Like, I see that she's a dominatrix. Is she a real dominatrix, or is she kind of a poser? Does she have any friends in the BDSM scene? How would she react to this? And it was a lot of interviewing. And then when I would do the strip, I'd send it to her. And there were a few times she said, that's not how QandA would talk. You really need... This is how she would phrase it, because it's a little more selfish that way. So she was involved in it, and, we did kind of both write the character, but we both had places we need Davin and QandA to go, and that's what the crossover ended up being about. And it was a lot of fun. It was a very long crossover, a month. Well, one day stretched out into a month, but still. And that's it. I mean, there's no set way to do crossovers. Everyone has a different method. Some people actually will write them at conventions when they see the person, or sometimes it's just shooting blind. Granted, I've never done a crossover with another comic, or with multiple comics at once, and I don't think I could. I think my characters have been featured in the background of a multi-superhero crossover that was done by the author of Mind Mistress, but just like a background one scene. So yeah, that's crossovers. So much more fun to read than to discuss. Sorry.